Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gen X Dad and his Gen Z Teens podcast. This is a program that takes a lighthearted look at generational differences about all sorts of topics. We explore everything from pop culture to history to relationships to sports to politics, but only at a very shallow level. We don't aim to be controversial or be the authoritative voice on any topic. We are not social scientists or scientists of any sort for that matter. We're just here to talk about the things that we think are important and that we will have fun talking about. Also, it is my opportunity to publicly and on the record prove that I am right and my teams are wrong in all cases, and that the 80s and the 90s were the absolutely best time to grow up. Our topic for today is college football. Now, as this podcast has gone on for a bit of time, we have developed a little bit of an international following. So first off, thank you to all of those folks. And second, just to put it into perspective, college and university, in particular sports, here in the United States is basically a semi-pro league in most cases. I've traveled mostly around, a big chunk of the world, and there's really nothing that's quite comparable that I've seen. Certainly not in the university system that exists that I've seen outside of the United States. And so with that, I mean, some of the colleges and universities here in the United States have just bigger stadiums than most professional teams do in the international sense. And it has really turned into just something quite amazing to go see. But also that's part of the controversy is now as it has gotten so big and there's so much money involved, let's take a look at some of the differences now and talk a little bit about some of the schools. So first off, just for perspective, growing up in the 80s, the university sports are supposed to be, at the truest sense, student athletes. They're all amateurs. However, the American public is passionate about American-style football, and then tie that to university alumni that want to see their schools do well, and it really is a passionate fan base. And that's why, in general, I don't see, even with the way the money and the way the game is changing in the university side, there's just no room for these things to go away because of the passionate fan base and the people that are willing to come out and see the games and want to support the teams. So what did the landscape in the 80s and 90s look like? It was pretty much the same that it had always been up to that point, and really up to really about 4 to 5 years ago when the game really changed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There were about, at that time, 100 major big colleges broken into about 10 major conferences. You played practically all your games within your conference, maybe a little bit outside. They were aligned typically with a particular bowl game was the highlight of your season. So, for instance, the Southeastern Conference was tied together with the Sugar Bowl, so the champion always went there. The Pac-10 and the Big Ten always went to the Rose Bowl. And it was an okay system for postseason, but where it really lacked and why the game really started to change was that there was no definitive ultimate champion. There was no playoff system. And so that's gone through different iterations, Bowl Championship Series, modified small playoff, which this year was the last year. And so next year, we're going into a true playoff system to actually figure out who a national championship is, champion is, because previously, before the modified way to do a playoff, it was sports writers that would just vote on it. And so if a couple teams that never played each other ended up being undefeated, it was just sports writers that ultimately determined the championship, and nobody was really happy about that, although it made for good water cooler talk. The three teams that I have raised you guys to follow. So the first one is LSU, because I grew up in Louisiana, and that's where I went watching games growing up. I was a fan growing up, and so I've always watched. Although I'm not the most absolute passionate fan as a lot of the people in Louisiana are. Obviously, Air Force, that's where I went to school, so I'm always pulling for my Falcons. That's a little easier than, say, an LSU, because it's easy to just get too wrapped up in LSU because they do compete at that very high level. Air Force, it's a winning team. It's a good team. It's a good program. But as of yet, we have not been in danger of winning a national championship, and that's okay. We win. We go to games. It's a great team. Proud of my guys. And then finally, your mom, you got a grandfather that went to UCLA, so we always pull for UCLA. And that's where your actual first experiences going to actually see a game and things like that have been at UCLA. So with that, those are the three teams that I've kind of raised you on. Just interested to hear about other teams, other programs, any thoughts that you have about stuff out there, because you guys have become much bigger football fans than, say, you were even just a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, LSU, UCLA, Air Force are kind of some big three. Obviously, it's always fun to watch Alabama or Georgia or Texas, just some of these other powerhouse teams. And I don't know. I mean, I like just watching the games. I like the stories behind a lot of it, especially more so than like professional football. It feels like there's, especially with all these like rivalry games and stuff, there's a story and there's a history behind the games. So they're a lot more fun to get into. And just the overall, I think passion surrounding the sport is just kind of unmatched, at least in other U.S. sports.
Okay, what about you?
I mean, the main ones that I follow is LSU, Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. And I think just like college football in general, there's always crazier stuff that happens in college than the NFL. Because NFL, there's a lot more money with it. There's a lot more people watching, and it's on a much bigger stage. But on college, you can see some really crazy plays, and that makes it sometimes more entertaining than the NFL.
Okay, fair enough. And now, is there anybody who you don't like? And I will start that one. Notre Dame. I cannot pull for Notre Dame. I've always find their fans a little bit on the obnoxious side. And while there is plenty of history with Notre Dame, I just can't do it. And so I will always pull for whoever is playing Notre Dame.
I don't know anyone specifically, but at least last season, Florida State was not my favorite. I did have a great time watching Georgia just smack them down in the bowl game. Just because of how their fans reacted towards the end of the season when the playoff selection. I didn't feel like they deserved to be in there, and I think they would have gotten beat in the first round. And I don't think it would have been a very TCU-esque situation, as shown by their later bowl game with Georgia and what happened there.
Yeah, it's the same thing for me. I hate Florida State. Their fans are annoying.
Okay, all right. We're not trying to be controversial. But that was a tough break for Florida State. And, again, I'm on board. I think the right decision was made. Okay, you've been to a couple of games. All right, tell me what the experience is like. And we're going to try and go to a couple more games this next season in particular. You guys both mentioned Texas. We're going to try and go down and see a Texas game. We're going to try and see Arizona State to add in there. But talk to me. You've seen UCLA, you've seen LSU, you've seen Air Force, and UNLV. That's another one we managed to see. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, just like the amount of kind of passion that surrounds this sport, I think it's, pretty comparable to like European soccer. And I guess just kind of worldwide, like the amount of passion like just people have for it is really, I would say, like infectious. And going to the games, you can really like feel the energy of everyone around you with all the highs and lows. throughout the game, and I think it's a great experience, and it's really fun to go.
Okay. Do you remember much of the games that you've been to?
I don't remember anything.
Okay, so we owe you some game time experience, and we're going to try and catch up on that. All right. What do you guys think? So the college game has dramatically changed. This is the first year that there will be a full playoff system, 12 teams. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. More competition creates more opportunity for upsets or interesting storylines or games. And I think it's more fair. I think just having 4 teams didn't really kind of encapsulate a lot. I think even maybe last year, if you had included maybe Georgia and Florida State and some of those other highly ranked teams, it could have made for a more interesting playoff.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good change because the 4-team system was kind of weird and no one ever agrees on it unanimously. So I think the 12-team is better.
Yeah, I agree. And part of the reason we're wrapped up in that is just the history of the bowls. That was a really difficult thing because the bowls bring a lot of money to their local communities. They were offering a lot of money to the teams, and it made it very difficult to switch over to a playoff system. With that, the other part that has been huge for university college athletics has been basically the recognition that it's semi-pro and that the players can get compensated. I think that's part of it. And give me your ideas on the NIL, name, image, likeness that they can do. But the other thing that's just crazy is just the, if you will, free agency, the transfer window. Guys can leave every year. You can play 4 years and play for 4 different teams. What do you think about that? Because that just didn't happen. So, I mean, I guess before I hand it over, in the 80s and 90s, I mean, you really grew. You could watch these players play potentially 4 years. Occasionally, some guys would go early into the NFL draft, but for the most part, a lot of them played all the way through to their senior year. Now, you're not sure who the team's going to be. I mean, it can happen. It can change pretty dramatically. I think there's a little something lost there, but ultimately, I do believe the fans just care more about the team than they do individual players. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them were the right moves to make. Just kind of pre-NIL, pre-transfer portal stuff. There was just these crazy stories of athletes kind of getting screwed over by the NCAA while the teams were making millions of dollars off of them. Like one of them that just came up is, Reggie Bush finally got his Heisman back, but that whole situation with him that happened was just kind of, it's just not fair to the athletes. I think as the years go by, they're going to continue to have to tweak the rules because I think with the way things are right now, it's created a weird dynamic and a weird kind of situation, so they're going to have to kind of figure things out. But I think at the end of the day, it was a necessary change to make, even though I think in some ways maybe changed the sport for the worst, but it still was necessary.
I think the NIL deals and all of that is good, but the transfer portal I think is a lot better because if you play for a team and you're pretty mediocre at that school, you could just transfer over to another school, get experience, get playing time, get recognition, and then hopefully go somewhere with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's professionalized the whole thing. I mean, I can only imagine what school administrators, athletic department administrators have to deal with, and I know coaches. To some degree, Nick Saban, who's the legendary coach, started. Got won his championship at LSU before he bailed on us and went to Alabama. He specifically pointed out that the way the game changed in regards to NIL and the transfer portal made it less enjoyable for him. I can understand that, but I also saw, the guys at Air Force who, again, aren't even near some of the level of pressure that some of these other big-time programs, and it was practically a full-time commitment by these guys, even with the limitations on how much they can practice and all this other stuff. It's insane the amount of pressure put on these guys. And then in some cases, you hear the horror stories of guys can't even afford a pizza. That's just ridiculous when administrators and coaches are making millions and millions of dollars. Something had to be done. I don't know where the final part, where it lays but there will be changes. I think it'll be a couple of super conferences and then a traditional level of just student athlete, amateur, playing for love of the game and for getting an education. There's a place for that. But for everyone else, I mean, the money's too big. It's too life-changing for individuals. And so just call it what it is. It's semi-pro. And it's tied to a university, and there's benefit for everyone because there's certainly enough money sloshing around, that's for sure. So with that, let's talk predictions. Obviously, I think LSU, Bruins, Falcons, 1, 2, 3. What do you think?
We'll see. Georgia's looking like they're going to probably have a pretty good year. Texas is looking pretty good. Bama, we're going to have to see with the new coaching what happens there, but player-wise, they look like they have a decent roster. And yeah, that's about all I've seen so far. I don't know about many other schools. Oregon's looking all right.
I think Georgia and LSU, it'll be interesting to watch them, but it'll be really interesting to watch Oregon, Washington, Michigan, and USC because they all just lost their starting quarterback to the draft. So it'll be interesting, especially Michigan, since they also lost their head coach. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out for them.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll certainly be, can you guys please promise to behave so we can go and see some of these teams and games and go from there. But, the jury's still out as far as what these changes are going to be. I think they're for the better. But as far as just from purity and, nostalgic love of the game, certainly in the 80s, it was a lot of fun, a lot of parody, and we'll go from there. So with that, go Tigers, go Falcons, go Bruins. Do good this year, guys. And that's all you have from the Gen X dad and his Gen Z teens. Thanks for listening in, and we'll catch you guys next week.